So we're recording.
Yeah, we are. Okay,
Okay, let me know when I should go.
go.
All set? Okay. So hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. Today we have licensed psychologist Dr. Marcia Eckerd. She will present a working guide to your NLD child during COVID-19. She's going to discuss the whys and hows of NLD kids, how they present their difficulties at home, especially during COVID-19 shutdown, and how we can help them. Her PowerPoint that she's going to be going through today at various times will be available on our website after the presentation, along with the video recording of this presentation. Dr. Eckerd is a graduate of Yale University, earned her PhD in clinical psychology from the City University of New York. She completed her internship and fellowship at New York Hospital Cornell Medical Center and trained with the Benson Henry Institute of Mass General Hospital, Harvard Medical School. She's a licensed psychologist for more than 35 years and is trained extensively in psychotherapy, cognitive behavior therapy, mind-body medicine, neuropsychological testing, and EMDR. Her practice mainly focuses on individuals with NLD, ADHD, and spectrum disorders. Today, your moderators are Eve Kessler, the founder of SpedNet Wilton, Carolina Corrigan, and I'm Janine Kelly. Just a couple ground rules. Feel free to ask questions at the end of Dr. Eckerd's presentation through the Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen. Please use the Q&A as opposed to the chat, because with the Q&A, we can keep track of whether the questions were answered. Also, be mindful that this is an open forum and we are videotaping it, so you may not want to share any personal information in your questions. We can't guarantee confidentiality. And lastly, any information provided in this webinar by the speaker or the moderators is not intended to be legal or therapeutic advice. The information, content, and materials are for general purposes only. So with that being said, welcome Dr. Eckerd.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody out there in the cloud somewhere. And I'm going to be going through quickly some of my earlier slides, because we want to get to the issues having to do with COVID. So I make a few comments on the earlier ones, but if there's anything that you're missing about NLD 101, just look at the whole slideshow. You can also contact me. I'd be more than glad to answer questions. So NLD is basically how kids process the world, and that means that they are neurodivergent. They process differently than we do. So if a kid is not responding the way we would respond, it's because he's processing it differently. And I just want to hit this, which is the problems most parents complain about, and inflexibility, the social ones, arguing, ruining family activities, which I find during COVID and lockdown is things like, oh, let's all have family board game night. And the kid goes, absolutely no way. Organization and refusing to do what's asked. I'm just going to come back to that later, because what we're going to see is going to be sometimes an exacerbation of what these things are, in particular as we move through this and we move to whatever the new normal is. We all know, at least at the moment, we've all been stuck home for a long time. Everything's been online, but in theory, at least, as we move ahead, there's going to be some things opening up where kids are going to be going out. So that's a piece of what we have to think about. And so this I'm going to be kind of running through. And so when you can't flexibly integrate information, what you need to do is you need to kind of find some way of organizing yourself. And so these kids tend to focus on details and miss the bigger picture. And many of them are rigid and they argue because they're doing the best they can to make life manageable, to cope. And I just had this slide because I think it's interesting. If you look at, this is done by a young woman who is an IQ, verbal IQ of 145, and she copied the figure on the left on the right, and you can, or at least that's how it looks to me, and you can see she did a really good job. But remember, I said kids with NLD get the details but not the big picture. And this is what it looked like when she drew it from memory about 15 minutes later. She had no idea what the overall thing is. So the same thing is going to be true with our kids. They're going to be focused on the details. They may miss the main idea of what's going on, and they may be sort of sticking on, but so-and-so is supposed to do this, or I want to do that. And they're not taking in, you know, the larger issue that you might be very strongly in touch with. So moving ahead, one of the things parents complain about, as I said, is inflexibility. These kids have what I call railroad track thinking. They kind of get on an idea and they're going straight ahead with it, even when we want to detour. One of the things about this time is life is an unending series of detours. None of us have any clarity. None of us really know exactly what's going to happen, what's going to be expected. And so for these kids especially, it's really hard to tolerate ambiguity, to tolerate not knowing what's coming ahead. They need predictability. They have trouble with transitions, and they're concrete black and white thinkers. And so what I want to do before I talk about handling that is to talk a moment about us, because as parents, and for me as therapists, we have to understand where we're coming from. And the fact is, this is a very challenging time. We are all, no matter what exactly we're listening to, we're all aware that there's something going on, there's a threat, we're all having to do things to deal with it. And what that does is it activates the stress response in us, which is physiological, it's not just psychological. And so your whole body is filled with stress hormone. And what happens when your body is filled with stress hormone is not only is it hard to is it more tiring, but it also makes it harder to think. There's a lot of research that shows that when we're feeling this way, or when our bodies are reacting this way to a perceived threat, we can't concentrate as well. We don't have the same kind of resilience that we might have, and we have more trouble making decisions. And so what that means is when we're dealing with our kids, we have to understand that it's harder for us to think. It's harder for us to be kind of the calm, wonderful people we all intend to be. And our kids are like tuning forks. They pick up our stress. So what that means is we need to cut everybody some slack. We need to cut ourselves some slack. We need to take care of ourselves so we can take care of our kids. And whatever it is that refuels your emotional tanks, you need to be paying attention to that right now, because that's going to help you deal with your children who are probably going to, at some point during all this, be more challenging, because there's this lack of predictability. There's all these transitions, and they're very black and white thinkers. So we're living in a very gray time right now. When kids are having difficulty, or they are acting out, or we've kind of reached our limit because we have several other kids who are all having needs and this particular kid is being challenged. One of the things that I suggest is that people have a signal, like this can be time out, because there's a time when we need space to breathe, or the child needs space to breathe, or we both need space to breathe. And so one of the things that is also important to know is, like I said, when you have the stress response, thinking is hard. In general, if somebody's upset or somebody's aroused, it's harder for us to think. And so that having someone who's upset and saying, well, explain to me why you're upset, explain to me what's going on, that is a non-starter, I'm afraid, because they're not going to be able to think. So we all need some time to kind of get our thinking capacity back together. So having a signal that says, okay, time out, but at the same time being very clear that in 15 minutes we'll talk, because otherwise the child feels that his needs or his ideas or her ideas are being put off indefinitely. And we don't want them to feel that way. We want them to feel we're paying attention. Sometimes we need it ourselves. Another thing that can be helpful to use in this is most people are familiar with the zones of regulation, where if you're blue, you're sad, you're green, you're kind of happy, you're mellow, you're yellow, you're kind of agitated, and red, boom, boom, you're blowing up. And you can say to a kid, it looks like you're yellow, maybe we ought to have this conversation later, or, I'm kind of yellow and I'm near red. And so I'm going to take some time to just cool down. We can model that for them. And so handling flexibility, one thing that's important to do is to listen. It's, you know, these kids get a lot of being told they're doing the wrong thing. And that's not really helpful. That's just going to make them feel that they're not understood. And that's something I hear from kids, from these kids all the time. So the first thing we have to do is, even if what their position is doesn't make sense to us, we have to listen to it. We have to validate, yes, I understand that's how you feel. And take it from his point of view or her point of view. And then once the child feels really understood and you check out, okay, so to you this is, and we've checked it out, then we present both sides. Well, I really get where you're coming from. You're coming from here. On the other hand, there's also this. And a lot of times the kids can actually participate in coming up with some kind of compromise or having some kind of way of handling it. But one thing we have to do in this time, and I can't stress it enough, is we have to be realistic. They're stressed, we're stressed, there's a lot going on, and there just has to be some compassion for ourselves and for them, that this is just a difficult time. And so there may be the child going back to behavior that you thought they were past. And it's not going to be permanent, but we just need to understand that all of us, including adults, tend to regress a little when we're facing these kinds of challenges. Another problem is being overwhelmed by situations, sensory problems, burnout, fatigue, just holding it together. Well, I think we can all relate to fatigue holding it together at this stage of the game, or at least I can. You know, I've become, you know, I'm doing a lot more cooking, a lot more cleaning, a lot more work. I'm having technical challenges in doing my work. So yeah, holding it together is tiring, and it is for them. And they may, some of them are frustrated by the work they're getting in the at-home schooling. Some of them have the sensory issues of just the home being a much more noisy place. And they're going to have to hold it together as the new normal hits. They're going to have to hold it together. And remember, they're black and white thinkers. So as they go out and as they are in the world, there's going to be rules. And different families might have different rules. Different towns might have different rules. And people who have NLD, children with NLD, are rule followers. They very much want, they're black and white. They want the rules to be followed. So what is your child going to do if your child goes out and everyone's supposed to be wearing masks and the other kids aren't? Or the other kids are getting closer than they're supposed to get. I had one little girl and I was out walking and I heard her say to her mom, "Am I the only one who doesn't get allowed to play?" And she was following the rules. Her mom was having her follow the rules, but the other kids who were going around in that area weren't. So we have to help our black and white kids figure out, how are we going to, what are we going to do with this? What are you supposed to do if you're in a classroom or you're out walking or you're out playing and some other kids are not doing what you're supposed to be doing, either because they're not listening to their parents or because they're just, their parents have a different point of view. And that's, our kids are black and white thinkers. They might be truth tellers and say, you're doing the wrong thing. And other kids don't take well to that necessarily. So we have to help them problem solve. What do you do if you are in a situation and there are kids who aren't following the rules, or there might be grown-ups who aren't following the rules? And, you know, it might be different for different families and for different kids, but this is a problem that we really need to solve together. And for some kids, you might say, I just want you to leave. For other kids, you know, again, normally we want them to assert themselves, but if they assert themselves and the other people aren't really paying attention to that, what do we want them to do? We also need them to use whatever strategies they have for emotional control for dealing with frustration, whether it's breathing or whether it's, you know, taking a break or whatever it is, because this is going to be challenging. This is going to be a very stimulating time in terms of tasks, in terms of the situations they're going to encounter. And as I said, previewing situations in advance, thinking through with your child, well, what's going to happen? How are we going to handle this? What as a family do we want to do? And predicting triggers. You know, if you know that there's a child that's going to be with your child who is not likely to be doing what you think or your child is expecting, that's going to be a trigger. While talking it through, and as I said, practicing those calming skills. I really encourage parents, if they haven't already, to bring meditation into your home. Meditation is actually proven to reduce the stress, but also to actually change the resilience in your brain on a structural basis. If you meditate daily for 8 weeks, your brain is structurally changed. And that doesn't mean they have to sit there and say Om or something. There are lots of wonderful meditations for children online. There are meditations for teens and for adults. And some good ones for the older ones are Headspace or Calm. And for the kids, there's one called Well Beyond. There's enchanted meditations for children. There are a lot of them. You don't necessarily have to hold still. If you have a child who's, you know, very antsy, holding still might be just too frustrating. You can meditate and walk. So there are all kinds of meditations there, but I really, really suggest it. And meditation can be part of the bedtime routine. But then once that's conditioned to their bodies and to ours, they can go out there. If there's something that's upsetting them, they can just do the beginning of it. They can just take those first breaths. And then what they're going to be able to do is have their bodies calm down. And that's going to help them think, oh, what did mom say I'm supposed to do in this situation? Or do I really want to do the thing that I feel an impulse to do? So this is a really good time to work on calming skills. Social demands is something we talk about a lot with our kids because they miss social rules, they miss nonverbal cues, they misinterpret, they have slow processing. But how do you interpret social cues when you have a mask on? One thing we tell them to do is to look for someone smiling. How are you going to tell someone's smiling if they're wearing a mask? So we really have to, again, help them problem solve by coming up with ideas. People will still have body language. They may be nodding if they're listening, and they may be looking off if they're tired of what our children are telling them. They may be inviting us to join verbally, or they may be, if you know, doing something else. But we really have to understand that this whole business of understanding nonverbal cues when people are wearing masks is a different situation. Right now, you can all see me, so if I smile, you know I'm smiling. But if I had my mask on, you couldn't tell it. So we have to really help them think about how can I pick up social cues given that we have all these different rules, and to have strategies if you're having trouble figuring out what can you do. Can you know, I always tell kids if they're in a conversation, they're not sure what to do, you can always nod your head, and that shows that you're there for them. But again, this is an area where we're going to need to be helping them. We're going to need to help them think about, remember I showed you all the detail in that picture where that young woman drew all those little unconnected details? Well, this is a time when we really need to emphasize what I call big picture thinking with our kids. Who's here? What's going on? Who else is involved? Maybe this has nothing to do with me. Or maybe there are people here who I know from experiencing them before are not really nice. Our kids sometimes seek out the wrong people because they're cool or because there's something about them that's appealing. But these might be kids who have been really hot and cold in terms of being mean and being nice. And so we have to really encourage big picture thinking. Where are we? Who's here? What's going on? Does this have to do with me? What are the expectations of this particular setting? And that's something, again, we can model, we can talk through it. You know, I'm going into this setting and here's my expectations. Everybody's going to be doing this. And here's, you know, if someone does, you know, just running through it with them. It's, again, the lack of clarity of right now is a real challenge for us. It's even a bigger challenge for these kids. So it's hard to preview things when you don't even know what's happening. So all we can do is be problem solvers. And I really encourage you to think in terms of reframing things as problems to be solved, rather than, oh my gosh, this is a situation that is out of control and we don't know how to cope with. Because it's really important for these kids that they feel there is structure, there are answers, that these problems can be dealt with, and we're just dealing with them one at a time as we move along. So again, teaching social skills might look a little bit different when we're having to stay further apart from people, when we're not able to see them smiling. So we're going to be learning about how to do this. We can share with our kids what we're learning, okay? How can you tell things? Understand that social demands are exhausting. And so sometimes when we are at home, even now, things that seem good to us, like family dinner or family board night or family watch a game or watch a movie, might be a social demand as far as the child goes. And so the child going up from the room doesn't mean they don't like you or want you. It may seem, I just sort of had it in terms of having to be social. And one of the things to realize is we need to be social with them. It's a two-way process. So maybe we can go to them if they're in their room and they're on, say, playing a game they like, and take an interest in what they're interested in. Ask about how to play. Let them teach you. We need to show them that we are connected and not just see it as them disconnecting from us. If we're not going out there, if we're not interested in what they're interested, we're disconnecting from them. And this is a time when they really need to know we're there for them. They really need to know we're consistent and they can count on us. So I mentioned talking about strategies. Model in real time and talk out loud about what you're doing. If you're in a situation and there's some adult who's doing something that's a challenge, or there's some adult where you're trying to figure out what they're doing, you can say to your child, I'm not sure exactly where, what he's doing, or I'm not sure. Or if you find, for example, you're doing social distancing and somebody's coming right at you, not wearing a mask, and that's not okay with you, well, this is a time to look 2 ways and cross the street. So we can talk out loud about how we're problem solving, and that will help our children have ideas about how problems are solved. When I say deconstruct social situations, I simply mean talk it through. Who's doing what? What does that mean? What did we do? What else might we do? And watching TV or watching videos is a great way to do this, because no matter what TV show it is, it's even SpongeBob, you have people reacting to each other. You have people saying things. Sometimes they say the wrong things. And we can say, well, how do you think so-and-so is going to react if he says this? And your child can tell you. The kids will say, oh, he's not going to like it. And you can say, well, what else could he have done? Oh, he could have done that. And so basically, we can use videos, we can use different things that we're watching to help kids anticipate these things. But then remember, they're very detail focused. So then when it comes up in real life, we can say, remember what was happening? Because I had one kid I worked with and we were watching Harry Potter together, and he really didn't like Malfoy. And we talked about, well, what did Malfoy do and Malfoy was doing some of the same things he did. Malfoy tended to order people around, or Malfoy tended to assume he was always right. And so this kid was like, oh, I don't want to be Malfoy, so I have to pick up when I'm doing this so I'm not being Malfoy. So again, watching TV, it doesn't matter what it is, it gives you something to refer back to with your child. And motor and sensory problems, again, what are the kind of activities kids are doing? How are they going to be challenged in these ways, and helping find ways to deal with it. I don't think there's going to be a lot of team sports going on, but if what the other kids are all doing are bike riding and your child has trouble with balance, how's he going to handle that? What is he going to do? And so it's really important for all of us that we be getting exercise right now. Part of self-care is eating well. Part of self-care is sleeping. Part of self-care is getting exercise. And I know you've heard a lot of times that one of the things we need to introduce right now is structure. And we're going to need to keep that structure even when, as we trend into or transition into whatever the next stages of this are. So handling motor challenges, handling sensory challenges, handling activity challenges, all of these are going to be things that we want to help our kids do. And sensory tools are something probably a lot of our kids have. And so I really recommend every tool your child has for self-calming is going to be really helpful now and as we move forward. Bullying, why, we all know about bullying. You've all dealt with bullying before. Our kids are particularly vulnerable to bullying. But one of the things we have to remember is these other kids are stressed too. And one thing that happens when we're stressed is we tend to take things out on other people. So, and there's also a lot more attention to social media, even more than normal, because that's the way people are connecting. So being aware of what's going on, being aware that kids are going to continue being kids, but they're going to be stressed kids, or they're going to be kids who are just coming out of being stir crazy. And so we have to be aware of the peer pressure or the bullying or the whatever our kids are experiencing and dealing with it, not, both in terms of helping our kids respond, but sometimes being proactive in terms of approaching parents. If a child is bullying our kid or making fun of our kid because our kid is following our rules, we may need to talk to the parent about this is what the rules in my family are, and it's important that your child accept what I'm telling my child to do. So again, just heightening our awareness of the challenges our kids will face, the fact that there might be a greater level of challenge in some of the things we're already used to. So teaching strategies for assertiveness, realistic planning, like I said, that big picture, who's going to be there? What do we know to expect from those people? And engaging the community. If there are other parents, can parents get together at all in terms of problem solving? Can we use our networks to create positive situations or positive agreements to how kids can be together and handle things? And having very realistic planning. This isn't the time when we should be Pollyanna. We don't want to scare anybody, but at the same time, we want to realize what is going on out there and how it affects our kids and how we want them to handle it. Now, this is about services. What I want to do, is go back to social, because one of the things that I know is coming up a lot is how can our kids be social when we're all in separate places? And one of the ways that most of us are doing it is with Zoom meetings or FaceTime meetings or some other online talking activity. And sometimes it's very difficult for our kids to initiate. They don't know where to start, or once they start, they don't know where to go with it. So one thing that I really recommend is having our kids share activities as opposed to simply having to talk. It's, they often had trouble talking on the phone. They might have trouble talking in Zoom as well. So one thing we can do is be really creative about how we structure time when our kids are going to be interacting by Zoom or by FaceTime or whatever we're doing. Doing things like playing Legos. Everybody dumps all their Legos out and it's kind of like they're playing together, but each of them is doing it in their home. Another one might be to play a card game. When you play War, you use the whole deck. So you can be putting out cards and interacting and doing that. Board games, whatever your child's board game is, if the other child has the same board game, you can keep track by both moving the pieces. So you have your own piece and the other person's piece on there, and you can kind of be playing a board game. Another thing is, if you have a FaceTime and you can walk around, it's on your phone, go for a walk. Show each other where you're walking, what you see, you know, show them around your house. You know, have some kind of thing where you're talking about something where it's easier, it's more structured. Show them your room, show them your comic book collection, whatever it is you might have. Something else that is kind of fun is if you have marshmallows and you have toothpicks, actually creating structures out of marshmallows and toothpicks. And believe it or not, this is one of the tasks they now have in job interviews in some places. So giving them this is a good thing to practice. But again, it's a creative game that they can do together. And I don't know that much about video games myself, so I contacted an expert, which is a 14-year-old patient of mine. And I said, okay, Alex, help me. What's a good thing to suggest here? And he told me that there's something that you can access online called Nintendo Switch Online, which is only $20 for the year. But it means if your children want to play together, but they don't have the same platform, this is a way they can have the same platform. One thing that's available through this Nintendo Switch platform is Mario. And kids like Mario, even older kids still like Mario. And there's another one that was, I'm forgetting, Mario and, well, Mario Maker, but there are other games that you approve of that can be either multiplayer games or kids can be playing and be next to each other. But this is a time when you need to be aware of what they're doing. They're not wearing headphones. They're, you know, so that you can be aware of what's going on. I think that this is a time we can get through. I think it's a time where the main issue is going to be flexibility, helping our Black and white kids be in a very gray world and come up with strategies, cutting the kids a lot of slack, that we're not going to be perfect, they're not going to be perfect. We're all going to be a little more reactive than we might normally be, but that's okay. We have realistic expectations. And really what we're all doing is just getting through this the best we can. And we have to help our kids who may be perfectionistic. They may have very high standards for themselves or for how they are with other kids or for others in the family, to understand this is a time when we don't get perfection. Maybe the online learning isn't perfect. Maybe their work isn't perfect. Maybe someone's response in the family isn't perfect, but you know what? This is a time when that's okay. I want to make sure we have plenty of times for questions and answers. So I'm going to pause here and see if there's any questions that we have.
Right now, we don't have any in the Q&A, but somebody might be typing, so.
Okay. Well, I think that, again, going back to some of the basics of NLD kids, we have to remember that they're going to be focusing on details. They're going to be missing the big picture. So it may be obvious to you that this is a time that's very difficult. There might have a brother and sister who are in the middle of a fight. This child might only be focusing on some specific detail of it that's a challenge for him or for her. And they may be arguing, or they may be rigid. They may be thinking that, okay, if they're having a problem, it's my job to jump in. And so we're going to have to help them explain, you know what, if two other people are having a problem, that's kind of their issue. And that's not something that you can fix, because often our kids will think, well, it's my job to fix things. It's my job to make things right. And actually it's not. And so helping them understand that big picture, this is between your brother and your sister and not you. And if it's bothering you, what can you do? What strategy can you have for getting away? There may be some other issue where there's a favorite food that you simply can't find in the store. You know, I don't understand why stores get out of chicken, but they do get out of chicken, or they might not have the brand of yogurt or whatever that your child likes. And so again, we're going to hit flexibility over and over again in so many different ways that we're not even thinking about, and helping our kids understand and let them know, I get it. You really like this particular brand of yogurt. You really like this kind of milk. You really prefer this kind of macaroni and cheese. But you know what? Right now, that's not there. And so what can we do? And how can we fix this? And again, remember, framing things as problems to solve, not just something to complain about, because that's going to be a terrific life skill for our kids. And I'm looking through. Verbal expression is something that can be slow for our kids, but that doesn't mean that they're not kind and they're not empathic. Most of us know our kids are incredibly sweet and incredibly loyal and incredibly good citizens. And so I think that, again, validating them, that their insights are really, really important, that they're going to come up with things that other people don't come up with, and having strategies ahead of time as we figure out what the challenges are going to be. Right now we have the challenges of all being at home, and I'm sure you've had plenty of time to learn what those are. And to help your child predict, you know, this is a difficult time. Maybe bedtime is difficult. Maybe getting up is difficult. Maybe getting family meals are difficult. Practically speaking, how can we make this work? Did we get any questions? I just wanted to check.
We, not really a question, more a statement. She says, I really like your realistic way of explaining the child's perspective during this unsettled time. Thank you for pointing out the pitfalls to expect.
Well, you know, I think that even I, and I'm laughing at this, can't know what it is we're going to run into, because we honestly don't all know what's going to be happening. And really being in touch with our child's point of view, validating our child's point of view, de-stressing ourselves first. Remember what I said about our own stress response, so that we might need to say, hey, I need a timeout. Mom needs to go breathe for a minute. And then we can come back and say, okay, tell me where you were coming from. Tell me, you know, what this is for you, whether it's in the house, whether it's transitions and issues and predictability in the house, or whether it's as we move outside and what they're being asked to do outside. None of us know right now whether there's going to be summer camps. None of us know right now whether there's going to be programs like Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, or things your kids may have really looked forward to. And so handling feelings, handling disappointment, handling those self-calming skills are going to be really important. One of the things I sometimes have kids do is come up with a list of all the things they really like doing, and finding opportunities for doing those things that maybe we're not including in the day, maybe we're not taking time for. Maybe they really love making music or music mixes, and that just hasn't fit into the day with school. We might need to make time for that. So I think I appreciate your comment, because I think for all of us, being very realistic, really getting the kid's point of view, helping the child get our point of view is a critically important thing for us to be doing. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that would be important.
Marcia, I have a question.
Yeah.
So going back to the inflexibility and the rigidity, which is a common theme actually with a lot of different levels of need, but especially now when there are so many restrictions on even leaving the house, can you share a few more strategies, de-escalation strategies that parents can use when the rigidity gets to the point where the child melts down?
Well, the one thing about a meltdown that I think is important is in general, and you know your child, but most of the time meltdowns mean your child is overwhelmed. There's just more coming in than they can deal with. And I liken it, I tend to compare it to cars at the Lincoln Tunnel. If there's just as much as as the tunnel can handle, then the traffic is flowing smoothly. When there's more than it can handle, what happens? We get a traffic jam, we get a backup. It can be an hour-long backup. And so when our kids have more coming in, and it may be sensory, it may be social, it may just be handling the amount of different things that we're kind of expecting them to kind of adapt to. When someone's overwhelmed, saying don't do that is really not going to be helpful. Time may be the most helpful thing. Again, you know your child. Does your child do best if they're given a chance to be by themselves? Do they have sensory tools that we can let them use? Even when your child is you know, maybe in an okay state, kind of talking through with him, you know, there's times when you get really frustrated. There's times when I get really frustrated. What works for you? What works for me? And maybe we can add a few skills that work in the house. Taking a walk if it's nice out. Some of you look like you're at the beach. Most of us aren't if we're around. But if it's nice out, taking a walk might be something. Getting outside can help clear our brains on all kinds of levels. And, you know, and giving them a place to go. Maybe if we're all stuck in the house, it's hard to have a private place. And so helping your child think through, where can I go to if I kind of need to shut out stimulation so I can regroup? Where's a place I can do that? I mean, maybe the bathtub, but I'm saying that.
I think they might have just frozen for a second there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we just have to wait for Marcia to become unfrozen.
Yeah.
Little internet glitches. Gotta love Zoom sometimes.
Yeah. New world we live in.
Yep. If anybody else has a question, maybe now's a good time.
Yeah.
I'll wait for Marcia to type into the Q&A spot on the bottom.
Oops. Oh, we lost her completely. All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Give her a second or?
Yeah, well, if any, like you said, if anybody has any questions, they want to plug in now, and hopefully we'll re-enter. If not, I think she covered a lot of the information she wanted to cover. And like we said, the PDF and the slides will be on our website, and this recording as well.
Oh, there's a new message. Oh, okay. Yeah, so visit us back on our website. For any friends who weren't able to attend today's webinar, they can see the recorded video on our website and also on Facebook. And also they can pull the PDF from today's lecture from there. Stay tuned, everyone, for our summer survival series, which will be blasting out tonight. We have a lot of different speakers who are willing to come and provide helpful tools that will help us get through the summer months. So thank you, everyone, for coming. Oh, here she is. We'll let her finish. Hi, Marcia.
Hi. Well, I mentioned technical challenges as part of what I'm having. So,
We were flexible.
and having to be flexible and having to have realistic expectations, which is, hey, this isn't going to be perfect. I know someone would say I did that on purpose just to prove my point, but I didn't. But it just goes to show we all are going to have to live and make compromises and deal with the fact that things aren't perfect. So at least I have time to say thank you so much for tuning in. And as I said, I'm glad to answer questions that you might have. You have my email information and you'll have my slides.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
for joining
Marcia.
us today. It was great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.